Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place due to the outbreak of COVID-19, this meeting of the Town of Berlin Select Board will be conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as soon as possible via technological means. The Town of Berlin will use best efforts to post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's webpage, town's YouTube channel, and approved minutes will be posted to mytowngovernment.org. All right. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. We have approval of the February 16th open session meeting minutes. Any comments? We're all set.
Nope.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Sorry.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second, sorry, I muted when my chime started going off, forgot to unmute.
Okay, then we'll take a vote. Keefe, aye.
Stone eye.
Hawkins, aye.
And correspondence. Margaret, do we have any correspondence?
There's no new correspondence today.
Okay. And general public comment. Oh, Victoria, there you are.
Here.
Okay. Then we'll move on to our general department update, which is Victoria Flynn from the Council on Aging. Hi, Victoria.
You have been getting tons of kudos, Victoria, on your outreach to the seniors in town, because I know I've been forking over your phone number and email address, and people in Facebook are extremely appreciative for you and everything that you have done. So on behalf, thank you for it all.
Yes, I had a phone call today from a senior who said that Victoria is wonderful.
Yay.
Margaret, are you taking notes for my review?
I sure am. It's recorded. It's recorded,
Yes,
Victoria.
yes.
We're good.
Okay, good. All right, we're good.
Show me the video.
So,
All right.
So I'm sure as you're all aware, COVID vaccine enrollment has been nothing really short of a challenge at this point. So starting I believe it was last Thursday, the governor lowered the age restriction down to 65 and older for those with 2 or more comorbidities, and for those who are living in a senior residence, like a senior housing, that type of housing. So of course, with that being said, people who are already having issues trying to get the vaccine are now facing even more challenge. So we're getting a lot of calls at the council, just people, not really sure what to do. We have been working with the Berlin Board of Health as well as the Neshoba Boards of Health, and the Neshoba Boards of Health had been doing a clinic at Fort Devens, usually every Wednesday, and the town of Berlin was allotted 10 participants for each clinic, which is not much, but the kind of hope was that even if these clinics were to continue for a long period of time, slowly but surely we could get people registered and inoculated. Well, we found out last week through the state that it looks like that the state is trying to now redivert all of the vaccines that are going to these smaller regional clinics and these councils on aging or senior centers now to the bigger mass vaccination sites and the pharmacies. So now a lot of the smaller towns, senior centers, council on agings are kind of like, well, we've been the one really orchestrating, trying to help people get registered and try to help people get their vaccinations. And now, people are now just kind of stuck waiting for the mass vaccination sites to basically update their data every Thursday. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but last Thursday, the sites actually crashed because I think they had just too much volume, and it took until Friday to resume. And, now that, again, we've got more and more people coming in, and there's, new vaccination sites, including the Natick Mall that just opened up today, becoming available, that's now a concern going forward. You can use 211 if you can get through. They have expanded their hours. I believe now from Monday through Friday, I believe it's 8:30 a.m. to about 8 p.m. And then on the weekends, I believe it's 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. And again, that's open, to, general questions and then registration and things like that. But today alone, we had 20 messages from people, most of them talking about COVID vaccinations, the frustrations that they're having. Is there anything that the council can really do about this? Is there anything that the town of Berlin can do? And most people, when you explain to them what's going on, no one, everybody has been really supportive and they've been very understanding, but it's just extremely frustrating that there's not much more we can do because unfortunately now we're relying on a state system as opposed to now a local system. So
Right.
that's really where we stand.
Yeah.
Very well explained, including the frustration piece.
Yeah, it's so at this point, what we're doing is that council on aging directors and like the local elder service agencies like Baypath, Montechusett, we meet with the state every other Friday at 2 o'clock because it's got my calendar. And they give us a full update from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. And they usually bring somebody in either from like DPH or somebody else who talks kind of more about like, what is the state's plan? They usually only talk about like a week at a time. But again, last Thursday kind of came as a surprise to us all because we weren't 100% sure when they were going to lower the age restriction. At this point, before today, it looks like the state had about 1.7 million vaccinations available and about 1.4 million had been distributed, which is good. Like we want people to get vaccinated, but unfortunately, and again, anybody who could try, going on these websites and seeing it, it's really, really frustrating. I've had numerous people tell me that they've tried to get on. By the time they found like the 5 available appointments, by the time they've plugged in all of their information, they've either been booked or their systems crashed. And then they got to start the process all over again. And getting through to 211 has not been much easier. So they're asking us to push patience, which, we can do. But, again, going back to the frustration piece of it, it's challenging.
Yeah.
It is.
So,
And Victoria and I have been talking, excuse me, through the chair, Victoria and I have been talking, and we've talked with Chief Clark too, about the potential for shifting our resources toward transportation for people who need transportation to the mass vaccination sites. Chief is willing to work with us on that. And given that the first responders have had both of their vaccines now, they're fully vaccinated, which creates less risk for them. And I've submitted an inquiry to the Administration of Finance in Boston to find out if our coronavirus relief funds could pay the wages for first responders, who we also know are qualified drivers, provided they have their driving records on file with us, to see if our coronavirus relief funds could pay for wages to transport people to vaccination appointments. I understand that there's a town, a certain town that I grew up in, Milford. Believe it or not, their police department is transporting people in cruisers. So they're picking up the ball wherever municipalities are picking up the ball wherever they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the council, what we're trying to do is we're going to resume our senior calling soon, with the hope being that we can, again, resume calls to seniors and just ask them, do you have any questions about COVID vaccines? Do you, again, not necessarily trying to do anything to pry, but just to kind of, pinpoint into people who may have questions. And then what we can do is I'm just telling people, send that information back to me, and then I can individually call and speak to these people and just say, hey, we got to do blah, blah, blah. And just make sure that, again, everybody gets heard. I may not have all the answers, but, at least, we're willing to call back and at least trying to explain what's going on to people. like I said, I tell everybody all the time, like, unfortunately, this is not the news I want to tell.
Right.
The CVS and Hudson had been distributing out vaccines, but I heard today that they've stopped because they had a shortage of supply. And then the Wegmans in Northborough, which again is the next closest site, I believe that they're booked well into March at this point, if not, going into April. So the accessibility is just not there yet. The Natick Mall did open as of today, so I'm hopeful that, come Thursday, more available appointments will be there. And again, that's probably just going to be, really realistically the closest site now for our, for those in Berlin. Worcester State had been having a clinic with St. Vincent's. I believe that that's still going, but because again, the shift of the vaccines is now going away from the hospitals and these smaller clinics now to the mass sites, it's really going to be, a question of when they're going to run out. Again, this is not set in stone, but this is what we were told as of Thursday. And then for those who have gotten the vaccines already at Devon's, the Berliners who had, they made it abundantly clear on Friday that those who've already gotten their first shot at with the Board of Health, those people should continue to get their vaccines there. They're not going to lose their vaccines again, at least from what the state told us on Friday. So, but we're constantly getting updates. It's at least one or two a week. And sometimes it's kind of status quo, and sometimes it's kind of status quo, and sometimes it's surprise, here's a change. So we're just really trying to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
The state has
So it's the child.
the
I was going to say
threshold
this
that
is
the
the
state
child
has.
that no one wanted. Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Victoria. It's your.
So I was going to say, like, this is like the child that like no COA wanted, but we all got. So now we're trying to help people deal with it. Because again, we weren't expecting this, but again, we understand too. There is just a shortage overall, and I was looking on today. The state sites aren't necessarily the clearest in terms of like which vaccine is what. So I'm working on compiling a list for people that we can post on our website of just like, if you go to this specific site, it's Pfizer or Moderna, or it's both, because some of them do have both. But just so you're aware too, because you can't mix your doses. And there are certain places in Boston that are really only offering Pfizer. And I would hate for somebody to then get Pfizer and then they're stuck and now they're trying to get it, they're going to a clinic that's now Moderna or vice versa. We don't want that. And now we're just waiting to hear too about Johnson & Johnson and if it gets approved. So it's where we stand.
And
Sorry,
the
Margaret.
Johnson & Johnson is only one shot, is it not?
Yes.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to,
So
if I could just add to everything Victoria has said, I just want to make clear the threshold that the state has now set for vaccination sites. Effective March 1st, any vaccination site must be able to sustain 750 vaccinations a day, 5 days a week, all through the phases. So it makes it absolutely impossible, except for the pharmacies and things. So we're talking about the clinics. It would make it impossible even for, it would make it impossible for our town to do it. But even for our region to do it, you'd need staffing of about 40 people a day, 5 days a week over the remainder of phase 2 and into phase 3 in order to, for the state to approve your vaccination clinic. So it's, they've set the bar very, very high. And all the efforts that we had put in on a regional clinic are kind of on hold at the moment.
Yeah. And it's sort of up to the state.
It's in the hands of the state.
I mean, in terms of like what you can do individually, I mean, at this point, it's really, reaching out to your state reps if you really have some concerns about this or questions. But beyond that, I mean, we're really just waiting for orders from from the higher ups as to what we really do next. So.
Where are they doing this at the Natick Mall?
I believe they said I think you're doing parking at either like the garage B or C. I think it's not like the Wegman side of the mall, but I believe that like towards like some of the stores, because I think some of the stores may have closed down, temporarily due to the pandemic. I think that there is like, I guess, a section of the mall that is specifically blocked off for the COVID vaccine.
I'm
Yeah,
sure there's-
Chris, I think it's somewhere around the old Cheesecake Factory that
Oh.
Yeah.
where Cheesecake is right there and then the garage is literally like right there. So,
Yeah, because that area near Wegmans is nuts. So
correct. And
Yeah.
Mr. Blair did reach out to me, Victoria, see if I'd be a Berlin caller again. I told him yes. So whatever you guys have for information, send it along and I'll
yeah,
start
we
giving a holler.
actually did hear out from a local Berliner last week, and I had a really great conversation with him. And he was telling me that some of his, he's spoken to some of his neighbors, and basically they were, trying to figure out ways to maybe help people get a transportation, kind of to and from, like if Berliners wanted to help out other Berliners. And, we agreed that it was good to really just kind of start the calling up again, because it's easier, when somebody, is calling you, just saying, hey, listen, if you don't know really what's going on, it's okay. Or, you can call this number and try to get more information versus, a total stranger calling you, or
Right.
trying to navigate the state like the state's website or the phone system by yourself, because it's daunting. I mean, it's daunting for us. I can't even imagine, not knowing much about computers or, and then trying to figure this out. So, and unfortunately, it's not the easiest thing in the world to navigate. And I really wish it was, because I think it would help stem a lot of confusion. And I think it would help, kind of ease some of that, tension or distress that people are having. But
Yeah.
so it's
Well,
just
happy
like I said,
to
it's
help,
hard.
happy to make the calls out to folks.
Thank you. So,
Absolutely.
like I said, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the council. I may not know the answers, but we'll do our absolute best to get back to you and see what we can do to help.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Victoria? Victoria, I've been drafting an email. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be a liaison if the Council on Aging needs a liaison. I can attend meetings and all that. I will explain it in my email.
Okay, sounds good.
But, if you need to touch base with someone, I'd be happy to be there for you.
We always love people at our meetings, Chris. So next one's tomorrow at 4 if you're free.
All right. And you have one tomorrow,
That's-
correct?
Tomorrow at 4.
Okay.
It's going to be more of the same of this. So get ready.
Okay. It's it's on my calendar. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you
Keep
so
up doing
much.
what you do so well.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Thank you, everybody,
Victoria.
for your time.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. And we're moving on to the town administrator report.
I'm going to touch on COVID tonight. Victoria covered all of that. So we'll jump to the human resource consultant class and the visit with a personnel committee. So the select board is posted now for Wednesday night with the personnel committee to hear the presentation from the human resources consultant. Scott, I saw an email from you a little while ago with questions on benefit accruals, and I know that the consultant did leave a few things as kind of policy-based items in the policies and procedures, her drafts. So I'm not sure if you were referring to that, but
Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Scott. Uh-oh. Well, we can't hear you.
It does that.
Scott's really not talking. He's just making the motions like he's talking.
And you can hear us, correct?
There he is.
There you go.
There you
All
go.
right.
And if you can hear me now, okay. Who knows? My email is just how vacations are grid. I read the yellow sections. I actually have other comments as well.
Mhm.
But I didn't read anywhere in there. I think I've looked at it several times, like how much vacation do people accrue? I couldn't find that anywhere in the plan or even a note that it should be written up in yellow. It says you can only carry over 5 days, and that part's in yellow to decide whether that's going to be our policy or not. But like, do they get 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 25 weeks?
Mhm. Okay.
I didn't see
So
it in
our,
there.
our current personnel policies and procedures do indicate that, so we probably want to kind of cross-reference with
Yep.
those there. Highway Department position vacancies. I have a meeting with Dave tomorrow to go over the resumes that we've received and schedule interviews in the coming week. I told him, as I'll tell you, that I do have some thoughts on the positions themselves. It is hard to get fully licensed people for the positions, and our class and comp plan does allow for positions that are graded lower. So I'm going to have a conversation with him about that to see if there's some way that we might be able to restructure and bolster some staffing capacity in that department. Finance. Tomorrow night is the regional school district's budget presentation and hearing. That's going to be held virtually tomorrow night at 6:30. That is the only agenda item. Folks can find the agenda and Zoom login at the on the school district's website. And then Wednesday night, Berlin Boylston's school district's budget meeting with FinCom was rescheduled to this coming Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And that's going to follow Assabet's budget meeting with FinCom at 7:30 p.m. On
So
Thursday
we're likely
night,
going from personnel to FinCom tomorrow, Wednesday night?
there's gonna be some hopping around, yeah. There's gonna be some overlap. We've got 1 hour personnel before FinCom starts. Last Thursday night, the Capital Planning Committee met and voted to recommend replacing the town office roof and the rooftop air handler at the town office building in their in their coming capital budget. We can talk about where that lands on the town meeting warrant, but they did approve recommending those replacements. They also received a late request for a capital project just over the weekend or the end of last week. So they might be meeting in the coming week to discuss that particular request. Tonight you have the draft contract on the library septic project. It is ready for execution subject to legal review. It is in town council's hands. Vendor has seen it. They're okay. They've got their payment bond ready. We're just about ready to go. We just need legal review. So my hope is that the board will vote to execute that subject to legal review. And then the parking lot resurfacing IFB has been issued. And as of today, Mary had already received 4 requests for the bid packet. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some interest in that project as well. I noted last week about the community one stop for growth and wanting to do a local stakeholders meeting with CMRPC. I'm working on getting availability from CMRPC reps for that particular meeting. And then I will poll local stakeholders from various departments, boards, and committees, similar to what we did with MVP, to try to get as many ideas as we possibly can built into an expression of interest. Jumping down to administration operations, the C3 retail marijuana establishment bumped up against some zoning issue hurdles. So Peg and I would like to brief the board on interest in reaching out to C3 and what, if anything, the town should be thinking about doing here. So Peg, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a couple ZBA meetings ago where C3 was on the agenda, and lots of interest, lots of discussion. I believe it was the council representing the city of Marlborough that was there that talked about the easement on the road, Banner Road down to where the proposed facility was. Marlborough pretty much said, no, you can't use our road to get down there. So Encore was going to go out and meet with a few other committees. It was rescheduled for a couple weeks ago. Met back, pretty much Marlborough was holding firm in their decision not to let us use the road. I had asked if there was any possibility to park at the community garden and maybe take a bus over. Answer was still no. It's use of that road to get down there I know there was talk of potentially building a walking bridge, but I think you'd have to hop, what, 2 rivers, Margaret? So you'd need conservation and lots of other people involved. It wouldn't be a quick fix. Same with if you tried to probably come in with a road, behind Best Buy to get there. Same thing, you're hopping through wetlands and water. So Peter Hoffman was in the meeting too. And he mentioned that he had spoken with people from EDC in Marlborough to find out what's going on there. He had spoken with people at Solomon Pond to see if there was anything that could be done there. Encore had reached out and asked if he could talk to me. I politely declined and said, not without Margaret. Well, because she had been so much involved, far more than I have with that. So that's how this kind of came bubbling up. I know that there's another option down at Taylor Road. Honestly, I don't know what he's thinking, he being Encore. If he wants to stay in Berlin, try and pursue other opportunities, I don't know. So I kind of figured that I owed it to him, we owed it to him to at least have maybe one final conversation. I know that he's chatted with Chris and Margaret as well to see if there's anything that the town of Berlin could do. He's been pointed towards Tim Wheeler on planning to try and throw ideas by Tim and see. So I don't know if it's a last ditch effort to try and save C3 or do something for them. But I figured what's a half an hour conversation? Either something's going to come out of it or the door is truly closed.
And so I'm as confused as I was at the beginning of this, is what is the legal agreement on the use of that road? I didn't realize roads had legal agreements on what you can do in the car that you're using to, like, this car is allowed to go down this road, but this car is not allowed to go down this road.
Margaret, you can probably better explain it than I, but it's the easement of the road. The road is not zoned for those types of businesses. So in essence, you could use the road to go down to the other 3 businesses that I think are at Banner Road now, but if you wanted to go down to marijuana facility, it's not zoned to be able to do that.
Sorry, I didn't realize roads had zoning.
I don't think anybody did, Scott. I think that was kind of a much as a surprise. Same thing with where the DCU is here and here's Donald Lynch and then the hotel and the old sports authority is there. You can't even put up a sign to say, hey, take this left, go down to the C3 facility. And I had asked, well, can you stick it at the end of the road, before you go on to Donald Lynch Boulevard? And the answer was, no, that's Marlboro property. So.
Well, I get that for signage. I don't get use of road. Like, I'm driving a car down a road, and so I can go down the road if my intent is A, but I can't drive down the road if my intent is B. Both are legal intents. So I don't get it. That's where I get lost.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers on zoning, and I thought that my understanding, and I could be wrong, was that DCU actually granted an easement to the businesses at 64 Banner, and so DCU was the first to weigh in on this, and then it was followed by Marlboro, because there is apparently some sort of zoning, I don't know, a zoning regulation out there.
State zoning or something.
All right, so state zoning, and there was either a court ruling or something to that effect that pertained to just this matter. I actually reached out to Richard Hanks on Friday to ask if he could provide a little more information on it for us, so we could have a little better insight as to what that state regulation is or what the court ruling was on that.
I mean, I know that there are other places that are zoned in Berlin. You've got Taylor Road, you've got the sand pit on River Road, one of them, east-west, and then the land that borders at Kane on the Hudson-Berlin line. I don't know if there's any others. So again, it's really just a discussion with Encore to be like, what do you want to do? Are there any other opportunities?
The land in Berlin is properly zoned for the C3 activity.
Mm-hmm.
It is the road that's not zoned because it goes to another town.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Someone will still have to explain that more to me. Like, can Clinton say people can't drive through Clinton to go to C3 because you have to drive on Route 62 somewhere in Clinton to come through? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of,
Yeah.
like, again, a town saying
We're
what
gonna
we
need
can
more
do in the town of
information.
Berlin with town of Berlin land and town of Berlin zoning based on their use of roads.
Well, I think it must be something that is true because it is stopping C3 from going through the process to open the store.
Mhm.
Let me,
Um,
I can ask Richard if he could follow up with us in a little more detail so we can understand it.
Yeah. I know Margaret and I did meet with Encore after he got the letter from Marlboro and the letter from DCU.
ECU.
And we helped to, or sort of suggest, things that he might look into. I don't know where that's gone since then. I don't know.
Taylor Road was actually mentioned
Mhm.
because, that property was
Mhm.
going to be, I don't know if it was going to be auctioned or something.
Mhm.
I think the family was selling the house or something. I don't know, how much do you think you're going to accomplish, Peg?
Probably not much, but if anything, Chris, the way that I look at it, as I said earlier, it's a half an hour. It's 30 minutes, peace of mind. We've tried everything, so no one truly walks away with a shoulda, coulda, woulda, type
I
of
feel
thing.
like that's what we did the last time.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know why he specifically asked to talk to me. I didn't inquire with him. I didn't reach out to him without dragging, my counterpart along. So I don't know. I can't answer that because I have not had any type of contact with him.
Yeah, because when we did meet with him, Margaret, he emailed us and requested it to meet with us.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. And this particular, I mean, what I see from this particular conversation that's scheduled tomorrow is just kind of restating what we've already said. We'd like to try to find a place for you here. We'd like to try to work with you. We want you to be able to stay. But he is the establishment, or he is the principal of the establishment, really needs to do the legwork.
Yeah.
So,
And it's, like we talked about before we met with him, you have to be very careful about, suggesting things and
Mhm.
having him feel like, we're pointing in one way that he might be
Right.
successful. And
I mean, he has all the key contacts in town, so it's not like anybody's going to toss him a name that he hasn't had before. It's going to be talk to Peter Hoffman at, EDC, talk to Mr. Wheeler on planning. He's got Lynn's name and number from ZBA. So
that's right.
I don't know. But again, it's 30 minutes or maybe not even, to talk to him.
Okay. Well, what do you think, Scott? You okay with this?
I mean, again, I'm still stuck at not
Scott's
being
stuck
able
on
to
the
drive on a
road.
road for purpose A. If I drive down the road for purpose A, I'm fine. If I drive down the road for purpose B, I'm not fine.
but if you're looking
What
at,
zoning law knows what I'm supposed to be doing? If I drive down that road to business A at Banner Road, I'm okay. But if I go to business B, I'm not okay. I
Scott,
can't get.
would it make more sense if you think of it in the context of DCU actually having control of that road and granting easements?
And so DCU can decide. So if we had a new business, so the Banner Road business has to run any new lease for any new business by DCU.
DCU for access.
So
And
any new business, because
I confirmed with Marlboro quite a while ago that Banner Road is not a public way in Marlboro. It is so my sense is that DCU controls the road and grants easements into that back property.
And they were given notice of the hearings and everything because they're in a butter.
right.
Well, we'll get more information from Richard as far as details.
I own
on
the
that.
easement for my camp in Maine for 25 years. And when someone got a new tenant, they didn't run the new tenant driving by, whether the new tenant had 4 cars or 2 cars or 1 car. I just had an easement because there was an easement. But I'll look up the ZBA meeting. I will watch the meeting and see if my question gets answered. But
Yeah, Scott, don't look at the most recent one because there really wasn't a lot of meat at that one. Go to the one before. It's pretty long. I think it started around 7:30 and went till a little bit after 9:30.
So there was only one other thing I was going to say about this is just that I'm going to suggest that, you know, when we have things that we want to do because of something we've gone to a meeting and something's come out of it, that each of us board members brings our requests to or questions to our posted meetings to discuss under board questions and comments or as an agenda item. I mean, please feel free to reach out to me if you want something that's really important on the agenda. Please, you know, reach out to me or reach out to Margaret. You know,
I have you in my report too, Chris, on the River Bridge issue. So
Uh,
it's a
in
lot
the
of free-
report. Oh, okay. I was
ZBA
going to talk
report.
about it under
Yeah,
board questions and comments.
I can defer.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So I just have a couple more, just two more things, actually. We've been talking about the Berlin-Boylston Regional School District lease agreement. So I have gathered regional school district lease agreements from literally across the state now. So we have lots and lots of models to choose from. So I'm going to start reviewing those. And Boylston has confirmed that they also do not have a lease agreement executed for the Boylston Elementary School yet. So in talking with the town administrator there, we'll do what we can to try to keep the provisions consistent and so that they work for both of our towns. And then the last thing I have is the River Bridge Development Agreement. And Chris, if you'd like to take that up under board question and comments, then
No, it
I
doesn't
am
matter.
done.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
All I was going to say is that, you know, we did have a River Bridge meeting. And at that meeting, Margaret suggested that we create a subgroup who would meet with the Sennies rather than everybody who was on the Zoom meeting originally. And so the subgroup did meet with the Sennies also last week to talk about their articles that they're requesting to put on annual town meeting listed by citizens petition. And basically, I think you know what the articles are. Maybe for the public's purposes, I could just run through it. You know, one would be for the drive-up facilities. One was for an all alcohol license for River Bridge only, which I think we're checking into, are we not, Margaret?
Well, they have to check into the address issue. That's their citizen petition, but they're requesting they're requesting the town authorize the board to petition for special legislation for the additional alcohol license.
Yes. And then there were two articles on zoning for the townhomes. One had to do with the development agreement. And then there was an article with their suggested changes, their wish list to the development agreement. So basically that was what I had. You wanna
Those
add
five
anything, Margaret?
citizen petitions came in today
Yep.
by the 5 o'clock deadline.
So Margaret, I have a question for you. We all saw the mail this weekend regarding Sears closing. So what impact, if any, does that have on the open space mitigation payment that's late? Anything at all?
Well, so Sears is its own entity and pays its own taxes. However, they are affiliated with Solomon Pond Mall. Well, there's not a direct correlation because we built Solomon Pond Mall, not Sears.
Okay.
I think that the difficulty that Sears has had here is a reflection on Simon Properties, the difficulty Simon Properties across the entire nation is having.
Okay.
So there's a few days left on that waiting period, but not a lot of hope. We'll see.
Okay, all right, Thanks.
All right. Anything else on the TA report, or are you good, Margaret?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. This isn't an agenda item for tonight. It was on last week's. It was comments on the state's 2030 clean energy, interim clean energy and climate plan. I put together some general comments from the town and incorporated the Ag Commission's comments. I know I put these in your agenda packet really late today. Tonight is the deadline to submit these comments, but again, they're general comments that I pulled directly from the strategy actions from the plan, and just kind of related them to Berlin's designation as a green community, and Berlin's interest in reducing or increasing energy efficiency and reducing carbon emissions. So after the meeting tonight, I will submit the comments using their online form.
Okay, did you want to vote? I'm
Couple of
sure.
highlights.
No, I was asking if you wanted to vote for this. Or does it matter? It doesn't matter to me.
I'm sorry that I'm sorry that I got them so late, but again, I just pulled them directly. I just pulled the comments directly from the strategy actions from the plan. So just to
If
quickly.
everybody's in agreement, then Margaret's going to send the men. Okay,
All right,
here we go.
I will do it. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Do you know, Margaret, do you know when our next, the next consortium meeting is?
I don't have a date yet, I don't think.
Okay, because I think it's in March, because they talked about it at the end of the meeting, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, I'm sure they're going to send us the link, but I can reach out to Pam in Hudson and ask her.
Okay, or she'll probably let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on? Old business. Review and vote to include annual town meeting warrant articles.
This is a feat. So currently 45 articles. And
That before the Sennies?
no, that includes the citizen petitions. So as far as voting, I'm numbering articles here. Yeah, 45. As far as voting I think last year what we did was we kind of just went through the articles and confirmed inclusion on the warrant, or the board did. Because this is the first time you're seeing the draft warrant, I don't know if you want to actually start moving on voting to include articles, or if you want to take time to review the entire compilation, since today was the closing of the warrant.
And the meeting has to start at 7:30, not 7. We're trying to get it done.
I don't think it has to, the bylaw, I don't believe the bylaw prescribes a time. It prescribes a date, but I don't think it prescribes a time.
I don't know. I hate to confuse people, but yeah, I know.
Well, we confuse people by having a special town meeting at 7 and the regular town meeting at 7:30, and that confuses people
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
true. Yep.
I'd almost like to, if we don't have a special town meeting, always start at 7. And when there's a special town meeting, that starts at 7 and the regular starts at 7:30. So people just know to be there at 7. But
Yep.
So that's
we can start going through these. I mean,
I looked through them today. I didn't see anything that, absolutely no, we don't need to put that in. I don't know how anybody else felt, if you want to go through each of them.
Actually,
Mary?
the bylaw does say shall be 7:30 on the
Oh,
first.
it does? Oh,
Yeah,
boo.
okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Okay,
Well,
well,
we could have a special- Anyway,
maybe we could add
Um,
that article.
I would like to
Fine.
know about where we are with snow and salt, because if we could do snow and salt as a reserve fund transfer or a budget line transfer instead of town meeting, that's one thing we could have to do at town meeting.
True.
It's also
Yeah.
not a controversial one to pay bills to remove snow that's already been
Yeah.
removed by the time we get to May.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
The
And
pumper truck one had only 1 year to do it, because when I was on FinCom, I was a huge proponent of sunsetting, and it never happened while I was on FinCom. I'm glad it exists now, but I would normally give people a couple of years to
No.
do things. And so we're looking at our other ones for capital stuff. Let's make sure they're all 2 years or 3 years to spend it for this exact reason. Sometimes there's just a delay in contracting and building, and you'd hate to lose the money just because of it.
believe it or not, this is the second year. So it was,
Oh.
I think it was approved in 2019, and so went through
Mm.
2021, but it's in the process of still being built. So it has to go yet another year.
We
Um,
only knew about COVID 2 years earlier.
So the snow and ice deficit, yes, we could look at doing an end of year appropriation transfer. We could do a reserve fund transfer, so that would eliminate having to include it on the warrant. The pumper tanker sunset clause extension would have to stay. But then the next one, the unpaid bills of prior fiscal years, could also be done through an end of year appropriation. No, couldn't. No,
No,
no, couldn't, because
no,
it's
you
a
can't. You
bill
can't
of
do
a
prior
fiscal
year. This is prior fiscal year. Yeah.
So, other than the fire department does have a donation fund that is a general donation fund that the chief could choose to pay the bill from, because those funds are not restricted. But that's going to be his call, and I've asked him about this particular article, and I'm waiting to hear back from him on that. The special
The-
legislation authorizing the fire chief to serve beyond the age of 65. This is
So
an intent.
the select board has voted on this several times. We have filed it with the state several times, and the town also needs to vote on this?
So our town council recommended that town meeting ratify it. It's gone through, it's supposedly going through the home rule process in Boston. So the governor is filing a petition on our behalf. But town council has recommended that it go before town meeting for ratification.
Is the town council requiring us to do this, or just saying it's a good, because again, we have a
They
very
vote-
busy town meeting on something that is highly not controversial, has been voted and discussed, I think, ad nauseum. I'm upset that we have to go to the state to hire somebody we want to hire, but still, this is going to be required again at town meeting. I want required.
I haven't had, this has not undergone legal review yet. None of the articles have.
Right.
And I can check with town council again, but when this was initially intended to appear on the December special town meeting warrant, that was town council's advice to present it to town meeting at a later time for ratification. I will double check with her on that. The next article would be the fiscal year 2021 capital budget, and the board had discussed in the past bringing forth the town office air handler and now roof as well, to try to get moving on the procurement for those two items. So in your draft warrant, I only show those two items on the FY21 capital grid.
Do you think we can vote those as, the capital planning, the plan itself? Can they take one vote for all of it, do you think, or do we need to go through each item? You know what I'm asking?
I think I know what you're asking, to take both of the items in the grid together?
Yes, in
think-
this case,
yes.
there's just two of them.
Yes, so the FY22 is a longer
Right.
longer grid. Barry, because these items are numbered, town meeting could vote them all together, items number 1 through whatever, in this case, 1 and 2. They could vote them together. Or Barry would allow them to be separated if anybody has any concerns on any of the projects in the grid.
Right,
it
so
allows it.
we could make a motion to pass them all at once.
Yeah.
And if that is voted down, then we'll do them individually.
You could do that.
Yeah.
this leaves that option open for Barry.
Might help.
And we're hoping to have a better number for the roof by the time we get to town meeting, correct? This is sort of a placeholder number. 200,000.
An estimate on the roof? Yeah, what we need from that company, which is the company that did the roof inspection, what we need from them is just a breakdown of those costs that they outlined in their estimate. So we'd like to know how much each component of the project would cost. Okay, the next one is another one that could be done through an end of year appropriation transfer. This is the compensation to Dennis Fairbay for achieving his certification as a Mass municipal treasurer. He did that this fiscal year. So rather than looking for the appropriation through town meeting, we could use the end of year appropriation transfer process. So we'll look at that. Okay. Next one. This is Dennis's article. Dennis has submitted this for the one-time costs associated with the tax collection software conversion from the point system to Vadar, the Vadar system. And Dennis has provided a summary of that here. The next is the Community Preservation Act 2021 annual budget. This was submitted by the Community Preservation Committee. These numbers that the committee has put in here still need to be confirmed by the town accountant for accuracy.
And this will now be sort of an annual article then going forward. Every year we'll have one of these?
Every year they'll present a budget. Yeah.
Is there any way to combine the 2021 and 2022, which are two separate articles now, as one article?
Oh, wow. Another question for legal counsel.
Because I think that would just speed it along. If we're like, because this is our first transfer to CPA, it's, I'll take a little explanation on the floor, but we say this is the fiscal year 21 and the fiscal year 22 money for a total of X.
It is. I will ask town council if we can combine 21 and 22. The next item, the next article is, my pen just completely fell apart. Hold on. The next item is a special article, the special article closeouts. June requested that this appear on for FY21 to close out the articles at the end of this fiscal year without having to carry them forward to FY22.
So when it says return them to the fund they came from,
That's
G is
correct.
raise and appropriate. That would mean we're returning them to the taxpayers, which is probably not what we want to do, is send everyone in town 28 cents.
So that would go, yeah.
And then the Highland Commons Cultural Fund doesn't exist anymore. We've drained it and closed it. And so I don't think we want to put money back into that.
Yeah, June would have to advise on what, well, first of all, the raise and appropriate would go back to free cash.
Right.
The Highland Commons Cultural Fund monies, June would have to determine where those monies will go back to, since the fund has been
Hopefully
closed out.
Yes.
Okay.
Did all of those articles have sunset clauses or no? And they're passed?
I don't know when sunset clauses began.
I don't remember what year it was either.
I don't believe the wellness trail had a sunset clause. And I don't know if the
Yeah,
other.
I don't think that one did either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like for about 2 years or so only.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
relatively
Okay.
new. Again, it wasn't done while I was on FinCom.
Okay. All right, so we'll ask June about where the funds would be returned to if the fund no longer exists. The next is an easy one, expanding the article scope for the Bullet House renovations to include engineering and design and surveys. Articles 11 through 17 are the so-called consent articles, and I know the moderator asks to move those in one, as one, I guess.
Yeah.
The
And
newest
it could
one
be
of the
since they're, it's through 17,
The
through
newest
16.
one,
Yep.
if they go to 17, and Article 17 is the newest of the consent articles, and this is a standard article that allows the select board to enter into contracts that exceed 3 years under purchasing laws. So this would be for long-term contracts, long-term lease agreements, something that would be for a, for a period greater than 3 years. So it's through 17. Outstanding town reports. I don't think Barry even takes a motion on this. I think he just calls for any outstanding annual town reports. The next item is the cable access spending, which has to be its own article for cables operating. And they did not, because of COVID, they did not get to their wiring, AV wiring project in the town offices. So Scott, for your information, they had requested last year, and town meeting approved last year, the wiring of 2 meeting rooms, room 218 and the hearing room here in the town offices, to actually record meetings. So they would actually have them wired for AV, but they never got
Nice.
to that project. So they're asking for the money again. Next one is CPA, FY22. We'll ask town council if those can be combined with 21.
You see where I get confused. Then after that, it says Article 17. So I thought it was everything.
Oh,
all
yeah.
through.
I forgot to remove
But
the article number.
Totally fine. Totally fine. This is an early draft. So
And this is the budget. So there you go. That's the operating budget article, Article 21. Article 22 is the longer capital grid. This is the FY22 capital grid. It's not because all of these monies, this is funding from free cash and Highland Commons public safety mitigation only. I guess there is the potential for combining the FY21 and 22 capital budget grids. You could do them both in the current fiscal year. You could do them both at once to avoid having a
Yeah.
separate capital article.
I'd look at the expiration dates. They all have just 1 year to spend their money.
Yeah.
The ones we have them.
Yeah.
It could be that's what they wanted to do, but just pointing that out for if that was by accident or on purpose.
Yeah. If we, of course, we buy ourselves a month, I suppose, if they were to be voted in FY21 and we could get going on the procurements for everything before
Yep.
July 1st.
Yep.
So it's an option. The next is EDC is going to be asking for a small amount of funding toward Welcome to Berlin roadside signs. They'd like to put 3 in strategic locations around town, and the EDC is going to be pursuing sponsorships through local businesses to help fund the remainder. This $2,000 would fund 1 of the 3 signs based on the estimate that EDC had received before. So we are just now waiting for confirmation of EDC's vote on this. So they should be meeting shortly to confirm that this is the form of the article they want. The next is an article that we received at the end of last week. This is the one that I was referring to with Capital Planning Committee. It was not submitted to the Capital Planning Committee for consideration according to the CPC's bylaw. So the Capital Planning Committee, the chair, Anna, has suggested that the Capital Planning Committee meet and discuss what the disposition of this article, what their recommendation would be on the article, given that it wasn't submitted to them as part of their process. And I understand too, and I haven't had time to look back, but apparently it appears there's an existing appropriation for this particular purpose for paving the driveways at the cemeteries. I don't know when that article was voted or the existing balance in that particular appropriation. So that's something I'll look into. I just haven't had a minute yet to do that. The next is Dennis's request to establish a tax title revolving fund. This is not a revolving fund that requires annual approval for expenditure thresholds. This is one that is actually the balance in the tax title revolving fund is derived from fees paid as part of the tax title process. This money, ultimately, it's going to take a while to accrue funds in it, but this would ultimately allow the tax title budget line to be removed from the operating budget so that tax titles can be self-sufficient. So Dennis would like to start this up. I think this is a really good tool for the collector.
So the money that's raised now goes where? Free cash, right?
Yes. Mhm. Yeah. General
And
fund revenue, and we budget.
right. And he says that right now, his line says the only alternative is to add fees to the recap sheet at the end of the year. But that's not true, because we can do a reserve fund transfer throughout the year on years where that is under budgeted.
You
Reserve
could.
fund transfer is exactly for this. There was unexpected expenses in a line that was budgeted. You
could.
can do a reserve fund transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could do that.
It goes to my continual dislike of new funds and new lines and other stuff, just because every one of those needs audited and tracking and makes that what used to be a 75 odd page report of our town finances just even harder to read and follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this would warrant additional discussion with Dennis on his request. Again, though, ultimately, it wouldn't be maintaining an operating budget line for tax title expenses to be borne by all the taxpayers in town. It would be a dedicated fund to be paid from tax title fees to pay for tax titles.
Right,
So
but right
that's the
now,
goal.
but right now, you say it comes from taxpayers, but then money comes into the general fund that then offsets
that's
the amount
true.
taxpayers have to
It's true.
pay. And so right now, it's just money comes into the general fund. It's not really officially spendable to the following year because until you've done the recap, it's not sort of listed as free cash.
Mhm.
And you're right, it does allow us to remove a line from the budget, but the cost of it creating a new fund that needs accounting and a fund that, according to this, expires in 3 years and would have to be voted again. So if it's going to take a couple of years to build up, I feel that as soon as it's built up, we're going to be revoking it. And so I question it.
Okay.
I don't think I question enough to stop it because you recommended it, Dennis recommended, whether or not.
I haven't
I
I haven't recommended it. I'm just citing all the articles that have been requested to be placed on the warrant so far, Scott.
Okay.
All right. Energy Committee Special Purpose Stabilization Fund. The Energy Committee had said that when they asked town meeting to approve the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund in 2019, their intent was to have recurring funding go into that fund from the energy aggregation adder. But town meeting didn't actually take that action. So the request is to allow the energy aggregation adder to provide recurring funding to that special stabilization fund for energy efficiency projects in town.
And what happens to those funds right now?
How much do we have in those funds?
No. So it's to take money and put it into this fund. That means there's money coming in now. That money coming in now goes to the general fund, and thus becomes part of the free cash we use to pay for all these capital items that we're trying to fund on a regular basis.
This would actually provide the funding then only for the energy efficiency projects. So the funding from the energy adder would go to that.
And that's a yearly article or no?
No, this would not. This would be to allow the energy aggregation adder to automatically be deposited to the energy stabilization fund. So that without further appropriation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the intent. I think that the
I
Energy
wasn't
Committee
here
had.
at the time, but that's how I understand it from Eloise. The next is a requested funding for the movable solar-powered radar speed limit signs, up to 4 of them based on the quotes we have. And I explain here the basis for the requested article. The police
And this has
chief
gone
is-
through capital planning?
This is not, these aren't capital, these are individual, there's 4 signs, $2,500 a piece. So these weren't presented to capital, these would be considered, I don't know if these would even be considered extraordinary expenditure. Without a specific definition, but at $2,500 a sign. I don't know if it would
Who's
qualify.
putting this article in? I don't have it in front of me.
Police chief, the police
Okay.
chief, but I do note here that the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee will also be providing a recommendation on the article.
Okay.
I guess, Scott, to your point, as far as capital, extraordinary expenditures, there may have to be more, a more detailed definition of what constitutes capital, what constitutes extraordinary expenditures. The bylaw or the administrative procedures say any asset with a value of $10,000 or greater or a lifespan of 5 or more years. And that's pretty standard. I think the state uses those general guidelines as well. But there's always that blurred line.
Mhm.
So the next one is, I didn't put a heading on it. It is this would
ALS.
be to fund, this would be to fund an ALS study. So this would be to fund, to determine the need to expand services to ALS level services, to examine all options with respect to the service delivery, and to analyze all short and long-term costs associated with expanding to ALS services. So it would give the town a clear picture of what would be provided as far as the service delivery and what those costs would be in both the short and long term. I do not have an estimate yet on that from a consultant. I don't think the chief has one either. The next is the fire chief's proposed general bylaw on the numbering of buildings. So this is street numbering, and I think there is a general consensus. I saw from the building commissioner too, that this rightfully belongs in the general bylaws as opposed to zoning bylaws. The next article would be on parking enforcement. The town does have parking, restricted parking signs up around town, but has no mechanism at all to enforce it because the town has not accepted the statutes regarding parking enforcement and the ability to impose fines for violations. So this next article, the next 2 articles actually, are with respect to parking enforcement. The first one would be to allow the police department to impose fines. Both of these articles would require the select board to establish policies and procedures or rules and regulations regarding parking enforcement. So something would have to be put into play. And the first article would also require that an employee of the town be designated as the parking clerk to collect fines and hear appeals on those fines. The second of the parking enforcement bylaws would pertain to the towing of vehicles that are illegally parked, whether it be in handicap parking spaces or blocking pedestrian crosswalks or things of that nature. And again, this would have to be incorporated into rules and regulations that are established by the select board for the police department to follow. The next one is, I've plugged this in for the personnel committee, and I am asking the personnel committee to provide recommendations on this. The personnel bylaws are already outdated. They've been in existence for years, and that there are some things that actually aren't relevant anymore in the personnel bylaws. With the updates of personnel policies and procedures as proposed or as shown in the draft by the HR consultant, there would be several additional policies and procedures. The personnel committee has talked in the past about removing all of, I believe it's section B of the personnel bylaws, which pertain to vacation. So rather than referring to established policies and procedures, the bylaws are spelling certain things out. So I've left this in for the Personnel Committee's discussion on Wednesday. The next one is the Wetland Protection Bylaw that's proposed by the Conservation Commission. I do ask in here, well, first of all, it's a very, very, very long bylaw. Has the town in the past included all of the verbiage in the warrant? Or have you referred to the text of the article being on file with the town clerk? Do you, has it varied from time to time?
I think mostly it's been in
The warrant.
the warrant.
Okay,
Mostly,
okay.
yeah, I
Which
agree,
is,
it's
which
mostly
is
been in-
fine. I mean, this duly notifies the public by having it in the warrant. I was just
Yeah.
curious. I think that what we'd have to do for an article like this, if we're going to abbreviate the motion sheet in any way, I think that what we probably should do is have separate town meeting handouts. I don't know if everybody should have the warrant in their books if they bring their books with them, but
Margaret,
yeah.
on this one, when did you get it from John?
When did
Let
we
me,
get it?
here, let me ask you,
Mary-
let me ask you
Mary-
this question. Did you get it after last Wednesday because they met last week and they revised it?
Yeah, I believe this is the revised
Okay.
version based on their meeting last Wednesday. I will confirm that with conservation because we had a few things going back and forth on this.
Okay,
They've also submitted a bulleted, a list or bulleted notes regarding the wetlands bylaw. So it's not part of the bylaw itself, but it's supporting documentation. So I ask here whether that summary, the bulleted items, should be included as part of their summary on the warrant as well. Maybe it should, given that it's just additional information supporting the bylaw. You all have that in your agenda folder. The next article is a zoning bylaw regarding home-based businesses. This would require that the business must, in a residential home-based contracting business, the business must be owned and operated by a resident of the dwelling. The next one, zoning bylaw, is the table of use regulations on home-based contracting businesses. This goes with the first article. The next would be a zoning bylaw amendment on in-law apartments by adding the language including any proposed addition or modification after total floor area. The next one would be on common driveways, adding a new section that any change or structural addition or modification beyond general maintenance in the location, width, length, height, or material composition of a common driveway affecting its accessibility by users or emergency vehicles or redirecting water runoff must be approved by the Berlin Planning Board, etc. Planning Board is yet to have the hearings on these. I don't know when those hearings are going to be scheduled. The next one is limiting the number of retail marijuana establishments to no more than 2 in town at any given time. The next article proposed by the Planning Board is to change the table of principal use regulations for residential care facilities, limiting the number to not more than 6 patients. Wait a second. Okay. Need clarification from them. And then the next 5 are the citizen petitions that Chris referenced for that have been submitted by Riverbridge, and finally the annual town election warrant article. So I think we've got opportunities to maybe combine some articles, maybe pull some off and use the end of year appropriation transfer process. Maybe we can try to trim it as best as possible.
Still going to be a little long, probably.
It's gonna be long, just the bylaws themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Is there any other questions about the warrant articles? Okay.
just noticed a few spots in there where it referenced Board of Selectmen. So just want to make sure that that gets,
Where is that? Peg?
I think that was in the police one.
Oh, that's the statute itself, though, so
okay,
you
all
can't
right.
change that, but.
Okay.
that's-
All right,
If you see anything else, though, let me know, please.
will do.
There'll be edits.
Okay, you want to
Yeah,
move
you
on?
might see in some of the edits whether some of the summaries can be made shorter.
Yeah.
Shorter.
Mhm.
I know, there was one that the
The
summary was
Dennis
longer
is-
than the
Right,
article.
Dennis's article is 3 lines and the summary is a half a page. And it could be
I'll
we have to
ask.
tighten it up. Well, see what we can tighten up. Because you also don't want the summary so short that people can ask 1,000 questions, because the purpose of the summary is to
Oh,
limit the
there is-
what does this mean questions.
Mary,
There used to be a 150 word limit, but we didn't set any parameter at this time. So
Oh, okay. I'll ask them to trim it down. All right. Maybe shorten the town meeting warrant from 44 pages to 30. See what you do.
good luck with that one.
Oh, boy.
Okay, did you want to move on to the fiscal year 2022 budget updates?
All right, so the only thing I want to discuss tonight are our projected revenues. And, we've talked about the administrative finance team reviewing the projected revenues based on the recap sheet and things like that. So there are just a couple of areas here that I want to highlight, and I think I actually can share my screen. Let's see, where is it? Yep. I think. Except it's not showing in my. Oh, there it is. Okay. Can you see it?
Mhm.
Okay, good. All right. So I just have the budget summary and then the summary ladder here. So what I want to do is I want to focus on the FY21 actuals or from the FY21 ATM approved through the FY22 projected preliminary revenues. So first, on the local property taxes used, we've talked a lot about the levy formula that DOR recommends. The levy formula really pertains to the levy limit. And because the town does not tax to the levy limit, I recommend that we use it only as a model. In this particular year, so the formula actually is, you take the prior year's levy limit, add the new growth, multiply that by 1.025 or 2.5%, and you essentially have your current year's levy limit. What we're proposing this year in order to try to mitigate the financial burden on taxpayers and understanding, Scott, your comment was well taken at one of your recent meetings with new growth. We calculate new growth, but we don't always calculate in what value is taken away based on abatements that are granted. We know that there are risks right now in the commercial tax space. So we want to try, and not only that, by having those risks in the commercial tax base and potentially granting abatements to commercial taxpayers, we are spreading out the burden onto residents even more. That said, the actual new growth, we had estimated back at the annual town meeting last year that new growth would come in at $200,000. New growth was actually $297,684. In calculating the local property taxes used, I did not count the new growth in this formula. All I counted was the prior year's levy limit multiplied by 1.025. I did not factor in $297,684 in new growth. Had we done that, had we used the levy formula, the increase in local property taxes used could have increased to 4.9 or 5%. So this actually controls the local property taxes used increase to 2.5%, which is kind of the basis of what we would like to follow. We understand that with new growth totaling $297,684, the value of the town, the entire valuation of the town should have increased, thereby kind of spreading out the tax burden over that wider valuation, wider total valuation. So again, what we're trying to do here is mitigate the burden, particularly on residential taxpayers, by not including the new growth from the FY21 or the FY20 recap, $297,684. So the entire increase in local property taxes used would be $309,359. When we get to the bottom of this sheet, when we see the maximum budget calculations, we can see what it would look like with that. A couple of other areas to highlight up here. We had projected at the annual town meeting that state aid would actually, we thought that there might be a risk that there would even be 9C cuts because of COVID or mid-year budget cuts at the state level because of COVID. There were not. And not only that, because the state has committed to funding COVID separately, they've also committed, at least the governor has so far in his H1 budget, he has committed to increasing unrestricted general government aid by 3.5%. So what the administrative finance team is saying here is, let's take what's in the governor's budget. We'll actually reduce those receipts, like the veterans abatements and the veterans benefits, the abatements and exemptions, and any other areas that are reduced. We'll reflect that accurately, and we'll level fund UGA, or unrestricted general government aid, at the FY21 level. So that would add about $40,601 to that particular revenue source. The next one is local receipts, and we have been seeing a bit of a decline in local receipts for two primary reasons. First, motor vehicle excise. Our motor vehicle excise collections were down slightly from the prior year. Now, we do expect that with occupancy at Riverbridge, we're going to have additional vehicles garaged in town, but we are not in a position right now to speculate on the additional vehicles in town or the full occupancy of the apartments. So motor vehicle excise is projected to remain down a little bit for now, assuming that people aren't replacing their cars with brand new vehicles and things like that. The other piece of this, the other bigger piece, is the building permits. So permits and licenses, particularly building permits with development activity. The town did see a spike in this over a few years when Highland Commons was being developed. That has backed off a little bit with building permit activity. However, there is still some development activity going on. You've got the over 55 units that are going up on Highland Street. You've got some other residential development going on in town, but we don't expect the level of building permit revenues to remain where it was in the last few years or the last several years when Highland Commons was being developed. So we're projecting conservatively right now $800,000. Offset receipts would be down a little bit because the plumbing and gas inspector has, and this is a direct offset, all these are direct offsets with the operating budget. The plumbing inspector has projected that he is not going to have the permit activity that he has had in the recent past with Riverbridge. And also, at the same time, the Board of Health is projecting that their offset receipts from transfer station revenues will increase by $10,000. So overall, there'd be a decrease in offset receipts of $25,000. Reserve receipts. The reserve receipts last year, Highland Commons is treated as a reserve receipt, and those reserve receipts paid for that $230,545 for the ladder truck debt payoff. That is now gone. So the reserve receipts are going to be applied to the ambulance operating. So there's $100,000 from ambulance receipts reserve for appropriation that goes into the budget, and also a small amount, well, about $210,000 that would be applied from Highland Commons Public Safety Mitigation to the base pay of 3 public safety personnel, 2 police officers and 1 firefighter EMT. And then other revenue sources. Last year, the town approved $140,000 from free cash to fund that contingency line item. If that is removed, the $140,000 of free cash funding is removed. However, there are some Berlin Memorial School capital projects, one-time projects that would show up in our operating budget. Because these are one-time costs, I would recommend that free cash is an appropriate funding source for those one-time capital projects. Even though they appear as an assessment in the operating budget, they are one-time projects. And then the additional piece of this would be $12,000 from, I'm estimating $12,000. We haven't gotten the budget request yet. $12,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund to fund year 1 of the Housing Consortium's assessment. So that would total $80,000. The obligations are an allowance for abatements and exemptions and state assessments. So combined, those are estimated at $296,617. So overall, the budget would decrease by about $130,000 from last year, largely because of that reduction in the contingency line item. The Finance Committee, though, however, is discussing the possibility of either including a contingency line item with a lesser amount to cover COVID-related, unanticipated COVID-related costs, or apply some free cash to funding an additional amount in the reserve fund to cover one-time unanticipated COVID-related costs. So they're discussing that now. Oh my God, I'm talking so much, I'm sorry. Let's see, going, move down. All right, so here we are in the maximum budget calculations. And this is where we show the amount in excess of the debt exclusion that we set aside. So these amounts here combined, I'm going to see if I can highlight it. These, nope. This line, and this line, 12,672, 100, 316, 802, and $200,000. Those combined would equal the levy limit, the tax levy that we could tax. The debt exclusion amount, and this is going to change once we know Tohonto's debt excluded debt service. Right now the estimate is $889,940, which is what the FY21's debt exclusion amount was. And then we've got the subtotal here. State aid, and these numbers right down here from below the subtotal down to this subtotal, the 15,812,589. We've already gone over these numbers right here. As well as the obligation we've gone over. So if we look at the amount we could tax, the maximum allowed FY22 budget of $15,515,972 minus what we project to be the FY22 budget, or the amount that I think it's the amount we show up top in the total income. There's a small difference right here of $1,199,436. That is the difference between the debt exclusion amount and the amount over the debt exclusion that we have as excess levy capacity. That is $309,496. You can see that our goal back in FY21 was to have just the debt excluded amount B, the amount of our excess levy capacity. In FY21 actual, when we look at the actual revenues that we receive, particularly that new growth number, there is some excess levy capacity over the debt exclusion amount, and that increases a little bit more in FY22. So that's what we've got so far. The good news is that because municipal departments have controlled or have submitted controlled budget requests for FY22. I do believe, and this is going to depend largely on what we see from the school district, but I do believe that we are going to have sufficient revenues to fund the budget.
Very good.
Yep. Okay. I know, Scott, Peg, Chris, any questions on this right now? Of course, these
Right,
numbers are moving. We don't want to
Right,
do
but
them.
the excess levy capacity is 1.2 million. So in theory, we could do an
1.2.
underride of 1.2 million.
To do an
And that would put us at-
underride for 1.2 million.
When I was
you-
talking about an underride, because we had excess levy capacity several weeks ago, I was told that we had used up all of our excess levy capacity was only a couple 100,000. Where
Mhm.
that line that says excess levy capacity says 1.2 million.
It's 1.2 million, but that includes the debt exclusion amount. If we were to do an
Right.
underride for that amount, we'd end up having to raise and appropriate to cover the amount that's budgeted for the debt service
Which
that's
we raise and
excluded.
appropriate for the debt exclusion because we pay.
Mhm.
What this means is that when that debt is done, we would
Yep.
have to
It'll
we would
go.
have to raise and appropriate if we wanted to continue spending that $800,000 a year, which we don't want to do. Just
That's
because
correct.
the debt goes away.
That is correct. Unless the town determines that it wants to borrow again and exclude that debt and carry that amount. But no, you're right. It will go away. It's going to go away.
Right, right. And so we could do an underwrite of 1.2 million and still be in fiscally okay shape. That we could take another
Now or
1.2
when the
million.
debt goes away.
Today, we could take another $1.2 million from taxpayers, which would freak everyone else at town without needing to get a special vote of taxpayers. We could raise taxes by 1.2 million.
You could raise taxes.
Which is again why I want to do the underwrite, because at no point do I want a board of selectmen to be able to raise taxes by $1.2 million without having to do a vote at the ballot box.
No, and that's why I feel that it's advisable to look at that $890,000 or whatever that amount is as money that is going to be money that's offset in the budget. When that debt goes away, that excess levy capacity goes away. And the town either ends up with zero excess levy capacity or whatever amount happens to be excess above that debt exclusion amount. I mean, there are towns out there that have, just hundreds of dollars in excess levy capacity. There are towns out there that have millions of dollars in excess levy capacity.
And there's towns that have to do 2.5% overrides on a regular basis, yes.
And yes, yeah. So anyway.
Well, I don't really want to talk about an underride when we're talking about Sears going out of business.
Right, so in the fiscal year 2 projected preliminary budget, there's still $200,000 of projected new growth, correct?
That's correct. That's what we're projecting for new growth at the moment. Yes.
Which
Yep.
I think is really dangerous for exactly
It
what Chris
is.
just said.
It is. Yep.
Well, it might be really dangerous to, after COVID is winding down, there may be many, many businesses that just aren't going to make it.
That's right.
All the more reason for that number to be zero.
How do you pay for what the townspeople want?
Yeah,
You-
I
that-
think
services.
we would have to have tough decisions. I think we lie to ourselves when we say that the commercial tax base in this town will be bigger a year from now than it is right now.
no, yeah.
No.
No, I agree. I agree that there's going to be some shifting. That shifting could very well be, like we said, from commercial to residential.
Which, when you say that, that means significantly increasing the taxes we charge residential people in this town. And so I think we should do a budget not based on $200,000 of new growth. And that might mean a much more austere budget. It might mean we have to not fund some things we want to fund. But that if we pretend there's $200,000 in new growth in this net net $200,000 in new growth in this town, and that doesn't happen, and we have significantly fewer businesses in this town, that is a big increase in taxes to our residential taxpayers that we are creating with this budget.
It could shift it.
Well.
And we have to remember, we did not include the new growth, the actual new growth in this number either, that's going to be levied. So that would essentially remove 2 years of new growth. Hey, if there's any time that you have to look at something like that, now's the time.
Well, I suppose, but I mean, what kind of time have you got, Margaret? Exactly.
Honestly,
I don't think this is the time to do it.
No, not an underride. No, not an underride,
That's what
but
I'm
I'm not talking about, I am arguing at this moment.
just,
I'm just upset that the number I was told 2 months ago when I was first looking at the underride was not true. But we'll go past that. I'm looking at the $200,000 in net new growth that's sitting in the budget right now. I think it's irresponsible to have in the budget.
I'm not sure I agree.
Chris, you're saying that the Sears property is gonna be worth $100,000 more next year when it's empty?
Well, we don't know that. We don't know. That's just the
Right,
point.
because we don't know, we don't want to plan there's going to be growth in this town when we know for sure there's not. I was
I have
chair of
already-
FinCom when the select board made this exact mistake several years ago. We ended up with a large increase in taxes because we
Well-
didn't properly budget net new growth.
No,
put together
I think
policies
there were other
because of
issues
that.
there. There were other issues there also.
there was an awful lot of raise and appropriate a few years ago. I think for various reasons. I don't know, but there was a big spike. But again, I'm getting back to the fact that we have not calculated in the actual new growth. That is not calculated in the taxes to be levied. I'm open to adjusting the $200,000 new growth figure on top of the $297,000 we're already excluding. If there are huge hits to commercial, we are starting to see some. If it means protecting, if it means protecting the tax payers from inordinate spikes, that's fine. That said, we still have to pay for education, which is by far our largest budget section, by far. We still have to pay for public safety and things like that. So I want to see, we don't have an indication yet what the school district is going to come in with for budget increases. And we really need that number. We
Yeah.
need to know
Which was
where
why
we
I argued we
stand.
needed that number in January and why every year we try to get preliminary numbers by January for that. Because we can't decide what we're doing on all this other stuff. They're almost half our budget and we know nothing about it.
Here's where we're at right now. Here's where we're at right
Right.
now, pulling the things. We're
Half our
at
budget
less
is
than
missing.
half. Yep, less than half. Because we have an entire budget section we just don't have answers on yet.
Mhm.
So anyway,
So that this conversation is a little preliminary. I think we need to wait for the numbers for the school.
and it's going to be interesting to see what that brings, and how we keep the cost to taxpayers manageable. So.
Yeah.
That's the goal here. We know everybody is suffering, and we don't want spikes.
Right. All right. Any other questions? Are we moving on to the library septic project contract?
I would just ask that the board, wait a minute, let me see here. What do we got? What do we have for signature lines on this one?
I think
Okay,
that's all
So
three in
I
there.
would suggest that the board vote to sign subject to legal review as to form.
Okay. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. I'm good with that. So why don't we take a vote? Keith, aye.
Stone Eye.
Hawkins, aye.
Okay, I'll let you know when we
Unanimous.
have feedback from legal.
All right. New business, execute the contract for Massachusetts Cultural Council fiscal year 2021 for the grant. And the grant is for $44,900.
This is the state's contribution
Yep.
to,
Look
Do I
fine,
hear-
right? I'll move it. Move
Okay,
approval.
And I'll second it.
okay. Keith, aye.
Stone Eye.
Hawkins, aye.
and that was for authorization for the chair to sign? Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Approval of fiscal year 2021 public safety mitigation invoice. This is for Benderson Development and Highland Commons.
So based on the CPI formula in the development agreement, the payment would be $594,825.08.
Do I hear a motion?
So
Is that it?
Move.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second, because I don't know which one of us approved
don't
it.
either.
So there you go. You got them both.
All right. Okay, let's take a vote. Keith, aye.
Stone Eye.
Hawkins, aye.
That's unanimous. And the next thing on here is a coffee talk, which is coming up Thursday, March 11th. And I was going to ask the board before we start talking about topics, would it make sense to push it out, to change it to say April 8th or the 15th or the 22nd so that it's before annual town meeting?
I was about to suggest the same thing. So yes,
Peg, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I would do the middle one of those three. I worry about the 25th is kind of really, really close to town meeting. So if something big came up, there's not a chance to get sort of more education out over a topic.
So we could go over, information for the annual town meeting
Mhm.
if it was in April.
Mhm.
So you're saying like the 8th or the 15th is best? Scott?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I think instead of going over everything, because I think there's a couple of other meetings that go over sort of lots of details, I think this could be where we highlight some of the bigger things. There's a chance to talk like the wetland, maybe as much of the bylaws and the other change. We can sort of poll a bunch of folks to see which topics from the town meeting are most
Yeah.
worthy of sort of deeper conversation.
Yeah. It sounds good. And then we'll come up with additional topics if we need them at a later meeting date or presentations or whatever else we need. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll move on to board questions and comments and liaison updates, although I have not had a chance to put my email out there for the different groups yet. I don't know about you guys.
I've managed to subscribe to their list. That's about as far as I got in the last week.
Yeah, I did too.
All right, well, I have my usual page and a half. All right, so on the energy, their meeting was last Wednesday. There is a request for them to come to an upcoming selectmen meeting. Currently, their total seats are 5, but unfortunately, it's only 3 people that are on there. And when only 2 show up, you can't do anything because you don't have a quorum. So, which was the case last Wednesday. Only 2 of the 3 members showed. So we just kind of ran and chatted for a half an hour. So there's a request from Energy to come to a not so distant board meeting to see what they need to do to drop from 5 to 3 to allow them to continue to have meetings if one member can't show up.
Is that something we can do, Margaret, or is that something? Okay.
Yeah, as long as the composition is not set by bylaw, and I don't believe it is.
Yep, I don't think it
Of
is.
course, I didn't believe the time if the town meeting was set up by bylaw.
So Chris and Margaret, when you're,
Bye-bye.
One
When you're-
moment, Mary.
It's not set by bylaw.
Oh,
You can-
good, okay.
Oh, good. Good. All right.
So Margaret, Chris, when you're talking agenda, could you keep them in mind to come and invite the energy board?
Yep.
All right. Moving on to conservation. They are also last Wednesday, they're proposing Earth Day again in April. So they would also like a chat with the board, probably sooner rather than later, to talk about logistics and, you know, what needs to happen and what, if anything, we can do to assist in either getting the word out. You know, I made a suggestion for Louise Janda to talk to Peter, you know, the Economic Development Committee to talk to the businesses in town to see if they were so kind as they were last year to donate coffee or ice cream and donuts like that. But they are requesting a visit to the board as well.
Okay. Got it.
Right. Also talking about conservation, Margaret was kind enough to pass along the steps for a public meeting. They know that they need to have a public meeting to discuss their bylaws, so they were looking as to what to do, how to do it, how to go about it. The question was asked, Margaret, I'm sure that you know this, how many weeks in advance do they have to have put out their public meetings to talk about the bylaw?
So with general bylaws, there is no requirement. So these are general
Okay.
bylaws, I believe they're requesting.
Okay.
That said, I think that a good rule of thumb would be at least 2 weeks to be
Yep.
able to provide sufficient notice.
Okay. All right, I will get back to them and let them know. There was also chat, especially on conservation, that there are multiple changes that need to be done to their webpage. And I know that there's changes that need to be done to other web pages as well. And even though, you know, Margaret, thanks for sending me the video. It didn't seem that bad to be able to go through and change it. So I'm hoping that they're able to go through and update their page. But in the event they cannot, or they don't find time, is it possible for us to reach out to either Tohoto or Assabet, or maybe in town, to see if somebody's like a web page person that they could offer their services to go and update pages, whether they're old members that are listed or changes in the way that the information is out there. I just don't want that to be a roadblock of, oh, I really don't have the time. Oh, I'm really not comfortable. And then when you go out there, you see old data. So I figured I would toss that one
Honestly, I
out there.
think that sounds like a great student project, to be honest.
Well, yeah, especially, you know, for seniors. You know, a lot of them, you have to write essays now on community service. So this one's an easy peasy. I know that the library had Aiden, and I forget the gentleman's name, young man's name. You could go over to 19 Carter, you got stuck on your iPad, he'd help you out. You got stuck on your Kindle, he'd help you out. So, you know, I don't know if there are folks in town that have that capability, that have that desire. So I figured I'd ask. I mean, I can reach, do you want to, I can put something together on Berlin Neighbors Connect and ask, or do you want it more formalized? Do you want me to reach out, you know, draft a letter, have you guys read it to send out to the superintendents at Assabet and Tohoto? Or just let the committees come to us and say, we need help?
I mean, do you want to draft something?
I can, but I also don't want to draft something if there aren't committees out there beyond conservation that needs help. You know, like I know finance needs updating when I was going through, and there were a couple other ones that need updates. I think
what about-
personnel might be one as well.
We
What about-
actually have a senior tax work-off participant who has done some of that work for us in the past. It's been
Mhm.
sporadic,
Mhm.
but maybe that person would be available to do a little bit under the senior tax work-off program still.
Okay. Do you want to send me that person's
Yeah.
name and I'll ask, and then I'll float it back through conservation when they meet in a couple weeks and see if they need help.
Sure.
All right, that one's done. So see, by reading all like the little town, the town newspapers, a couple years ago, during my run, we had talked about recycle and how the cost of recycling is just going through the roof, and especially glass, where it's so heavy and it easily contaminates. And I brought up glass fault, which was what New York was doing, and kind of got laughed at for it. Well, lo and behold, reading the Wicked Local out of Marlboro, guess what they're doing? Glass fault. Because the cost of, I wrote it down, has gone up to $95 a ton to get rid of glass in Marlboro. So what they're doing is they use it as an aggregate in some of the smaller road projects or sand for doing pipe laying. So what I wanted to do, what I wanted to pass by you is that I'm totally fine going to the highway people and department people over in Marlboro and finding out exactly what they're doing and what the process is, and then bring that back to either the Board of Health and or highway to see if it's possible. I know people were kind of freaking out at the cost of their dump sticker. That went up from like 110 to 195. So if there's any way that we can, possibly again, box outside, look at reducing either costs or, reduce the cost in recycling. Again, it's a conversation. What's the worst thing that can happen? You realize it's not worth the time for the bang. So why not? But I found it interesting that, Marlboro was into glass fault.
I don't think it hurts to investigate.
Okay. All right. So I will do that. The grant tracker, Margaret, thank you for creating that folder. I'll get that updated. Yeah, Chris, since you're the one who kind of like signs off of them, if you could just run it through on the tracker on the Excel spreadsheet and make sure that I'm putting in all the appropriate data. So it's there, that would be great. And then especially for the ones that require updates like every quarter or evaluations every quarter for that. So
I looked at it today and I thought it looked fine.
okay.
I didn't go into a lot of detail because I
Okay.
wasn't exactly sure what you were looking for.
Yeah, so all I wanted to do, so on the Excel spreadsheet is to make
You want
sure
me to
that I
look
was,
through all the contracts and make sure the dates are plugged in?
yeah, and that's what it is, because I went through them this weekend and, some of them were a bit of a scavenger hunt to, figure out when it started and when it ends, and when one evaluation is due and when another evaluation is due, and I don't know if we've done the evaluations and not even quite sure who would do the evaluations. So to try and take that off Margaret's place so she's not chasing, who's got the grant and who's updating the grant. Because I know, like the street one was due in December. So figured I would take the charge on that. And then speaking of grants, Scott, I know you mentioned a couple weeks ago that you were looking into one about the buildings, didn't know.
That's still part of the open space ones that Margaret's also looking at. So I'm not,
Okay.
I don't want to step on toes or don't want us to accidentally work on two competing stuff. I think we're still trying to figure out what the best use of that money is for the town.
All right. And let's see.
Although Margaret, I still might push my favorite one is still stabilizing the foundation of the Bullard House. I think fits pretty good for that because that helps preserve a town asset that's not being fully utilized, can't be utilized until the grant. I think it hits a lot of the star points that grant looked like it was looking for.
Well, we have to start building our list. This is going to be like an idea brainstorming session. Put all the projects in one expression of interest.
Yep.
And then I'm sure the answer is no on this, Margaret, because there hasn't been a meeting, but do you have any feedback on the questions that you had sent to cemetery a couple of weeks ago?
I have no feedback yet. No, although Barry has told me he's working on it.
Okay. All right. That concludes Peg's question and answer session.
Okay, Scott, did you have anything?
No, I got my stuff out during the meeting.
Okay. So I just wanted to let you all know that I had a very nice phone call from a resident today. Like I said, she had complimented Victoria, and she wanted to compliment our board because she sees the meetings, I would say, a day or two later. But she is so impressed with how well we're working together, and that there's so much work to be done. And Margaret is a godsend. Although one of the reasons she was calling was to give me some feedback on the NIPS thing.
Yeah, I think the chatter has calmed down a little bit, but as soon as I shared it out there, it was just like,
Yeah.
you know, for yes, no, and somewhere in the middle.
Well, this was a no NIPS family. This person told me so. And she's tired of picking things up on the roadside. I also wanted to ask, there seems to be so many Google folder links. Is there like a list of them somewhere? So, because what if you can't think of the name of whatever folder you're looking for? How can you find it?
I try to think of what I think is the title and the name of the file itself and use the search bar. I mean, it's also what I do at work, where I probably have several thousand folders and files, and I just try to narrow it down. I was trying to find the budget this afternoon for today's conversation, and I typed budget. I was at least able to find a couple of budget files, but lacking that, it's not easy.
No, I mean, if we just even had like one email that had all the names of them, or I hate to say a Google folder with all the names, you know, and the links.
I'm like, I don't know. It would be wonderful to try to consolidate, but once you do that, you also run the risk of having things buried in folders that you wouldn't expect to go to. So,
and the way permissions work, it is hard to.
You're right.
The work permissions when you start doing embedded folders. Just from experience at work, we run across that more times than I care about.
Right, because if you don't give permission for the parent folder, you're only I've run into that too. Maybe Chris, maybe there's something, I don't know. Mary's probably back there brainstorming now.
No, yeah. Yeah, no, it's just basically whatever terms you want, you put into the Google search engine. So the idea is just, if you're looking for NIPS and you don't know where it's tucked, type NIPS in, and then it's going to show up. That's the whole beauty of the Google Drive, which we were pushed into doing a couple years ago. I embrace, but if, you know, the whole idea is now you don't have to know what the name of the folder is. You can just look for the terms of what you want.
Like
it may not even be in the folder you think it should be in. It could be related to a meeting that we've had in the past. So just use Google, and in the Drive, Google whatever word you're looking for. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Well, I know I've searched for example, like the 2/22/21 meeting. That's how I find the drive for that, the folder for that. But sometimes like things don't come up. Is that what you're talking about in the same search?
So if you went to the Google Drive and you typed in Benderson, or you typed in Flatpenny, or you typed in whatever, it doesn't have to be married to a meet. It is in a meeting folder, but everything relating to those words are going to show up.
Okay.
And from those headings, you may or may not be able to determine if that's what you're looking for. If it's the minute of a meeting, it's going to be tucked within the text of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if it was a policy or something substantial, a document that has a standalone Flatpenny, let's say, you'd be able to find documents relating to that.
Okay.
If you want, I can do it with you and show you around a little bit more about Google Drive.
All right. I mean, let me try it out and see how I do. I just, you know, wasn't sure that you could actually Google words like that, you know.
Yeah, so once you have Drive open, if you go into the search bar within Drive and you just type 2-22, you actually come up with any file or folder that has 2-22 in the title.
Right.
So
Right.
you can find those. And I can tell you what I've done to keep myself organized, and everyone organizes differently. There's no right or wrong way to organize, but
Yeah.
I have saved bookmarks to the folder, which is called Select Board. What's the one? Yeah, fiscal year 21 BOS meetings. I have created that as a bookmark because that's where I can go, because that takes me right to our folders for each meeting. And then I also have a bookmark, which is actually this Zoom session, so that if I don't have to go digging for the special thing for Zoom. And then I've created a couple for folders that I know I use a lot. For some reason, I happen, who would guess? I have capital planning and FinComs folders sort of as my sort of regular go-to folders.
Go
Because
figure.
they're spreadsheets, you know? And so I'm in spreadsheets a lot.
Mary,
And
did you?
Genius, and that's genius because everyone is going to have their own liaison assignments and whatever. So some organization is going to work differently for different people, but the data is all there.
Okay.
But we can whiz around together if you want on a Zoom call, and I can show you some more. Peg, do you feel comfortable with that?
I do. So Mary, you had sent out one, oh dear God, a while ago, and I think you entitled it "Worthy of a Bookmark," which gets us into our meeting. And then, so I just go there, and then from there in the Google Drive, I just start typing and find stuff.
Okay.
All right. Hey, let me take a look at it and I'll let you know, Mary.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. I think that was all my questions. So where am I here?
Executive
The
session.
board needs to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, which is, we're going to be talking about police union and fire union negotiations. And we will only return to open session thereafter to adjourn.